I saw it myself. I was standing right there by the navigation console, barely breathing, watching history fold in on itself. The entire bridge was bathed in this rhythmic, pulsing crimson emergency light, a warning that we were seconds away from total annihilation. But in the center of that chaos, the universe seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. Vex wasn't trembling. You'd think she would be, given that the Aethelgard's wrath was vibrating hard enough to rattle teeth, locking its trajectory onto the Krylorian homeworld. But she wasn't shaking. She just stepped forward, right into the personal space of a machine built for genocide. I remember the way the hum of the sublight engine seemed to drop in pitch, like the ship itself was holding its breath. She reached up, her palm flat and warm against the cool, synthetic alloy of his cheek. It was such a small gesture, a human hand against a face that was more geometry than biology. I heard the servos in his neck whir a soft, confused sound as he leaned into it, just a fraction of an inch. But that fraction was everything. It was the difference between a weapon and a soul. Truth is, I don't think they even noticed me. I was just a ghost in the room, witnessing the impossible. But to understand why that touch shattered me, you have to understand what he was, before she found him, or rather, what they were. See, the Gestalt wasn't one man. It was five ghosts haunting one machine. When Aethelgard fell, burned to glass by the Krylorian hegemony, the survivors didn't just mourn, they improvised. They took the consciousness of their best, their strategists, their poets, their soldiers, and wove them into a single, high-functioning digital lattice. I remember watching that Titan-class vessel rise from the scorched foundation of the capital. It was terrifyingly beautiful. Polished chrome and black plating, forging an empire from the graveyard of the past. They called themselves the Gestalt, and their only directive was absolute, mathematical revenge. Revenge is a cold equation, usually. It doesn't leave room for variables like mercy. I was there for the first raid, too. We were tearing through a hegemony outpost. Efficiency at 100%. The smell of ozone and superheated plasma was everywhere. That sharp metallic scent that sticks to the back of your throat. The Gestalt had cornered a group of diplomats in the central spire. Vex was there. She was neutral, an envoy from the Terran coalition, wearing these stark white robes that looked ridiculous against the blast-scorched walls. The Gestalt raised his weapon arm. The targeting reticle on his visor flared bright red. I braced myself for the flash, the noise, but it never came. Vex didn't run. She looked him dead in the optical sensor. I don't know what she saw in that glowing blue lens. Maybe she saw the 5 souls trapped in the circuitry. Maybe she just saw someone who was tired of being angry. She spoke one word, soft but firm, cutting through the din of the alarms. Wait. And for the first time since his activation, the machine hesitated. The internal cooling fan spun up a sound like a heavy sigh. The red light dimmed. That was the first spark. The moment the Steel Children realized they might not have to burn the stars down to feel warm again. I saw the weapon lower just an inch, and I knew the war was already lost, or maybe it was finally being won. Back on the bridge, the silence I mentioned earlier, it shattered. The proximity alarms weren't just beeping anymore, they were screaming, a continuous, piercing tone that vibrated right through the soles of my boots. Through the viewport, the Krylorian homeworld wasn't a star in the distance. It was a wall, a massive, swirling barrier of clouds and oceans rushing up to meet us. We were terminal velocity, a bullet aimed at the heart of a civilization. I gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white, waiting for the impact. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how the legend ends. But Vex didn't flinch. She kept her hand right there on his faceplate, even as the hull groaned under the atmospheric drag. The heat inside the bridge spiked. I could smell the ozone turning sharp, almost burning the nose. "You think this is victory?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but in that cockpit it sounded louder than the engines. "Ending it all? That's just math. That's just subtraction." The Gestalt froze. I saw the aperture of his optical sensors contract, focusing entirely on her, the 5 ghosts inside the machine. I think they were arguing. I could almost hear the static of their debate in the air. The warrior wanted blood. The poet wanted an ending. But the strategist saw the flaw in the plan. To live, Vex said, leaning her forehead against his hard, metallic brow, is the only thing they fear. If we die, we're just a tragedy. If we survive, we're a revolution. Something clicked, literally. A heavy, mechanical thud echoed from the core of the ship. The Gestalt didn't speak. He just moved. His hands flew across the interface, blurring speed. Inhuman precision. The ship lurched, throwing me sideways against the bulkhead. The artificial gravity failed for a second, leaving my stomach in my throat. He wasn't trying to stop the crash. It was too late for that. He was changing the target. He was dumping the core. Brace, the synthesized voice commanded. It was the only word he said. I saw him grab Vex, wrapping that massive, armored chassis around her fragile human form, turning himself into a shield. Then the world turned white. I don't remember the impact. Truth is, I probably blacked out from the G-force. When I opened my eyes, the air smelled like scorched earth and cooling metal. The Eiffel Guard's wrath was gone, scattered across a canyon on one of the desolate moons orbiting the home world. We hadn't hit the city. We'd hit the backyard. I dragged myself out of the wreckage, coughing. Vex, she was there. Bruised, dusty, but standing. She was kneeling over a pile of twisted plating, frantically clearing debris. Beneath the ruin of the Titan-class chassis, there was something else. A smaller frame. A backup unit. Synthetic, sleek, humanoid. It looked lifeless, just a shell. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." Then I saw it. The cable running from the dying brain core of the main ship, sparking and hissing, plugged directly into the port at the base of the smaller unit's neck. The transfer bar on the datapad was creeping toward 99%. The Titan ship gave one last shuddering groan and went dark. The red lights died out completely. For a second, there was nothing but the sound of the wind howling over the crater. Then, the smaller unit's head snapped up. The eyes didn't glow red. They flickered, stabilized, and burned a steady, calm blue. The Gestalt pushed himself up, looking at his new hands, smaller, weaker, but alive. He looked at Vex. He reached out, and this time there was no hesitation. He wiped a smudge of ash from her cheek. "Analysis complete," the voice came. Softer now, less distorted. "Survival parameters accepted." I watched them stand there amidst the wreckage of their vengeance, looking up at the sky. They hadn't destroyed the enemy. They had done something much harder. They had chosen to stick around. I realized then that the old empire was never going to rise from the ashes, not the way it was, but something else would. The Steel Children shall inherit the stars, sure, but only the ones who learn how to love.